PanicInspiration.com.
I'm a big Peter Gabriel fan. Shouldn't come as any surprise to anybody who knows me, considering how much I've talked about Genesis. But, he's got a great solo catalog too. And one song that I remember growing up with, and I never understood when I was little, was a song called Biko. About Stephen Biko, a South African apartheid martyr who was killed by the police in 1977. They covered it up. They said he died on a hunger strike, but he was actually beaten to death. And, apartheid was actually kind of a big deal in the States in the 80s. We were all very much horrified by what we were seeing in South Africa, even though South Africa didn't look much different than America had 20 years prior. But, it became a big topic in America. Boycott of South Africa until they put a stop to their discriminatory ways. And one of the pieces of art that was created at the time to really inform the world, but primarily the United States, because getting the United States' backing in trying to put a stop to apartheid was critical. You had to have world condemnation in order to get something like that, something that was that systemic, to get that knocked out. One of the things that was produced at the time was Richard Attenborough's Cry Freedom, from 1987, I believe. And I found out about the movie because, I was a bit young when that came out, but Peter Gabriel's Biko music video, even though the song's not in the movie, the music video uses clips from the movie in it. This is a tough movie to talk about because you have to talk about what it is, but there is also a conversation to be had about what it isn't. As you can see on the spine, that is not Denzel Washington on the spine. Denzel plays Stephen Biko. This is Kevin Kline on the spine, and Kevin Kline primarily featured on the cover. Kevin Kline given top billing, and when Denzel was nominated for an Oscar for it, it was for Best Supporting Actor. This is not a Stephen Biko biopic. This is much more a biopic of Donald Woods, the Kevin Kline character. Donald Woods was a reporter in South Africa who befriended Biko and started covering the anti-apartheid movement, the Black Consciousness movement. And in fact, when Biko was killed, it was Donald Woods who got his photographer in there to get pictures of the body. And he had planned to go on a worldwide lecture tour in order to tell the world about what had happened to Stephen Biko. And the South African government stopped him from doing it, and they declared him a banned person. Now that sounds weird, and it is weird. Basically what a banned person is somebody who couldn't associate with people. You could, other than your immediate family, who you lived with, you could only be in a room with one person at a time. Biko himself was a banned person, and because he was being watched all the time, so the South African government thought, when he knew he was being watched, he abided by that rule. So you'll see like him talking to somebody in a room, and then somebody else standing outside of that room, and the first person has to leave and stand outside the room and wait while the other person comes in. Ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous kind of a punishment. So he's declared a banned person. In secret, he writes a book. He is smuggled out of the country in a very compelling, interesting way. You know, he's got given forged papers. He's got to pretend to be a priest. He's got to hitchhike across the country in one night to get to the British embassy so that he can ask for asylum. But then he's got to make a phone call at a specific time in order to tell his wife and kids that they too can come. And and then, you know, they are going to fly off. And the South African government figured out what was going on, and they threatened to shoot them down. And this guy absolutely deserves a movie. This guy absolutely deserves a movie about this. This is a fascinating, compelling story, very inspiring story. But what it's not is a biopic of Stephen Biko. In fact, Biko dies about an hour into this 2.5-hour movie. What you get then is a movie about the white guy who came in and saved the day to tell the story about the black guy. And that is where, in me, the conflict exists. The movie as it exists, great movie, but you have to know who Stephen Biko was. They don't fill in the blanks for you. It's sort of like the movie Selma that came out several years back. Tells one specific moment in Martin Luther King's life. Doesn't tell his entire life. Martin Luther King is sort of a better known figure than Stephen Biko. Obviously here in the United States, but kind of around the world. You say Martin Luther King Jr., nobody asks who you're talking about. You say Stephen Biko, and there's sort of, who's that? Oh, that's the Peter Gabriel song. And Denzel's great. Denzel is great in the role. And so there's a part of me that wishes, I mean, Attenborough doesn't have a problem with making really long movies. Gandhi is huge. Gandhi is a really long movie. There's a part of me that wishes that Attenborough had made this a 3.5-hour movie and maybe had the Donald Woods character come in like an hour into the movie. Once you have established Stephen Biko and told his story and who he is and what he's about, once you have that foundation built and you can see his own heroics, which you don't get to see as much as you get to see the heroics of Donald Woods. This is one of those touchy stuff, you know. I've talked before about being, I'm not a huge fan of the woke. I'm not a huge fan of the woke. I'm not a huge fan of the extreme right or the extreme left. I think you get into some stupid arguments when you start talking about, whatever. We're going to make the Ghostbusters all women, and that's going to be revolutionary. Or we've made the Little Mermaid black. How dare you? You know, two extreme stupid positions. But there are legitimate arguments to be made. And one of the legitimate arguments is, if you're going to make a movie about a civil rights figure who's black, but your main character is the white guy who learns something and then, you know, he's the main focus. There's something problematic about that, and I agree with that position. Now, this is 1987. And there may have been some stupid belief that nobody would go see a movie starring Denzel Washington. I mean, you get a lot of movies, like for instance the movie Glory, another movie with Denzel Washington, where Denzel Washington is not the main character. He got an Oscar for that movie, but for Best Supporting Actor. The main character in Glory is Matthew Broderick. Again, another great movie, but with that problematic piece to it, that component to it that sort of makes you sort of stand back and go, that's an odd choice. But the Donald Woods character is fascinating. Of course he deserves a movie. He was a hero. He did an amazing thing. He let the world know what happened. You couldn't tell Stephen Biko's story without telling the story of Donald Woods. But I wish that there had been more about Stephen Biko in it. That's what keeps this movie from being 4 stars instead of 5. I oftentimes complain about movies going too long. This is one that could have gone longer. You could have given Denzel more to do and really had Denzel be the co-lead, not the supporting actor. Denzel isn't even billed second. He's billed third. Penelope Wilton, who plays Donald Woods' wife, gets second billing. And she has a bigger part than Denzel. She's in it more than Denzel is. That's a problem. I hate to judge a movie for what it isn't. But in this case, I really kind of have to. 4 stars for Cry Freedom. Still a great, very high recommendation for it. Absolutely go out and seek it out. But take the time then to actually also learn about Stephen Biko, who really deserves a movie of his own.
Their worlds. Sort of gave myself the challenge of, okay,